یاد همه شهدا، یاد امام بزن دخول حرم تو. مجنون عشق هشتم هستم، مدیون بانوی قم هستم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Assalamu alaikum, Hajj Kauther. Yes, sir, I can. Yes. How are you? No. Yes, sir. Yes. Absolutely.
ألف لام.
Perfect. It's beautiful.
الله لا
I cannot see you.
إله
Sure.
إلا هو الحي القيوم.
Alhamdulillah. Yes. Thank you so much for asking. Just trying to stay busy with work and a little bit of school and whatnot. But otherwise, amazing. How are you? How are the little ones? Not so little now?
مصدقا لما بين يديه.
Inshallah, your shadow never leaves from on top of their heads, and inshallah, they have the blessing of having you in their lives.
مصدقا لما بين يديه وأنزل التوراة والإنجيل. من قبل هدى للناس وأنزل الفرقان. إن الذين كفروا بآيات الله لهم عذاب شديد. والله عزيز ذو انتقام. إن الله لا يخفى عليه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء. هو الذي يصوركم في الأرحام كيف يشاء. هو الذي يصوركم في الأرحام كيف يشاء. لا إله إلا هو العزيز الحكيم.
Yes, sir.
هو الذي أنزل عليك الكتاب منه هن أم الكتاب وأخر
Give me 1 second. Sorry. Give me 1 second.
متشابهات فأما الذين في قلوبهم زيغ فيتبعون ما تشابه منه ابتغاء الفتنة وابتغاء تأويله وما يعلم تأويله إلا الله والراسخون في العلم يقولون آمنا به كل من عند ربنا وما يذكر إلا أولو الألباب ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب والراسخون في العلم يقولون آمنا به كل من عند ربنا وما يذكر إلا أولو الألباب ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا إنك جامع الناس ليوم لا ريب فيه ربنا إنك جامع الناس ليوم صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'm going to be giving a short lecture tonight, inshallah. I know you're used to Sheikh Mudaris, Sheikh Ahmed Mudaris giving you a lecture. I apologize, he's not here. So unfortunately, you guys will have to listen to me, inshallah. But hopefully tonight we can learn something, and we can have some questions and answers at the end, inshallah. I'm going to make it I'll try to make it as informative and beneficial as possible. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Muhammad wa ahli bayt tayyibin at-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. The topic I want to speak about tonight, inshallah, is I want to touch a little bit upon the rights of the believer. And how I want to approach this is I want to speak about a very particular person we have in Islamic history, Hazrat Ma'suma, which her birthday is in just a few days on Monday. And one of the interesting things we have is that it's very difficult sometimes for us, especially living in the West, to keep track of the births and the deaths of the different imams and the people related to those imams and the events surrounding those things, because we're so far and so distant away from them. Sometimes in terms of physical distance, and then sometimes also because our heart drifts away, sometimes because of spiritual distance. But Hazrat Ma'suma is an interesting personality that I wanted to speak about for a few reasons. One reason is that she is one of the many examples and archetypes and symbols that we have in Islamic history which show us a profound example. And this example is an example of sacrifice. This is an example of iman. This is an example of courage. This is an example of devotion. This is an example of love. If you were to take all of these qualities, these beautiful qualities, and if you were to put them in a story and in a person, it would be the story of Hazrat Ma'suma. Now, many of you already know much of the story. I'm not going to dwell a lot on the story, but I want to talk about a few salient things from her life, and then I want to relate that to the rights of a believer, because that's very, very important when we discuss her life, to discuss kind of the lessons that her life can teach us. As you know, she was the sister of Imam Riza, and one of the important things regarding her life is beginning off with all of the imams of Ahlul Bayt and their lives. It starts off with their names. Their names are a very important aspect of who they are. Now, I want to speak about this for just a second, because the names that the imams alayhim salam gave their children set a precedent for us to understand what we're supposed to do. Something that we have to realize about the imams of Ahlul Bayt, all of the prophets, all of the anbiya, all of the imams, they came for one reason, and that reason was to come to bring us the truth and reality of what this world is. Not only what this world is, but what the hereafter is. The imams didn't exaggerate, they didn't make up things, they didn't embellish things. They really came to show us what reality is. When we see something, so that we can see something as it truly is. So one of the interesting things about this particular lady is her name was Fatima. And in this understanding of her name, we begin to ask, why is it that this lady has so much importance, and why is it the imams, since she has so much importance in our religion, in our culture, in our history, we have a shrine related to her. For those of you who have been to Qom, you guys have visited her shrine and you guys have seen the profound effect that it has. You have a shrine in a city of learning, that so much spirituality has gone around and congregated just around this shrine, that we see there's something special about this lady. It's not that she's just somebody that's ordinary. And her name is Fatima. Just like many of the imams, they named the names of their children Fatima. Now, it would seem kind of redundant. The imams of Ahlul Bayt, sometimes they'd have 2 children, 3 children, 4 children, 4 women in the family, and they'd still name all of those children Fatima. And to us, we say, okay, well, they named their children Fatima because this was just a good name to have. But it's a little bit more than that. We have an interesting tradition. And this tradition, this hadith, says that the children have 3 rights over their fathers. The first is that they are given good names. Second is that they are provided good education. And lastly is that they help them to select a good spouse. These are the 3 huquq, these are the 3 rights that a child has on their parents. Now, in the modern day, we find that many people, they decide to name, and which is totally okay. We have traditions that say always name your child a good name. So that's the most important thing, that we name our child a good name. But in addition to that, it's very important that we give our child, if we can, name our child the names of Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salam. Especially with girls, the name Fatima, or Zainab, or somebody who's a woman from Ahlul Bayt. Now, it's not bad to give our children the names of, some people give their children the names of a river or a cat or whatever it is, and that's good as well, or the moon, that's good as well. But giving our children names like this has a huge, profound effect on their destiny. One is, from a psychological point of view, we can see that children who have certain names, this becomes their identity. This becomes the thing that they refer back to. The first question a child always has, and the first story we always tell children, is children always want to know about their name. It's the first way that we teach them about their name. And the second way we end up teaching them is we teach them about the personality that their name is named after. So although naming them after a river or a beautiful tree or something else is good, but these personalities of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, it introduces them to the possibility of becoming something far better than what they could possibly imagine. You know, we can imagine a tree, we can imagine a river, we can imagine a beautiful thing. But when we think of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, this is something completely different. It's not something that it's not something that we can simply imagine that from nature or from something very simple, but imagining Ahlul Bayt is giving our child also a goal to measure themselves to. It's giving them a role model to measure themselves to. And then it's connecting them to all of those values that Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam stood for. So this name Fatima is very important. One of the traditions that we have regarding this name, we have a tradition by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, keep good names, because on the day of judgment, you will be called by these names only. It will be proclaimed on the day of judgment that so-and-so and son of so-and-so or daughter of so-and-so, rise and get associated with your nur. So-and-so, whoever you are, arise, and if there is no light, and go to the light that will guide you. So giving our children these names is not simply a matter of, okay, it's a good name to have, but this has a profound effect not only on them in this dunya, but it has a profound effect on them in the akhirah. So it's something that we're giving our children not only for this world, but we're giving our children for the hereafter as well. This is the reason why giving a child a good name is very important. When we introduce our children to this name of Fatima, we introduce them obviously to Fatima Zahra, and then we introduce them to Fatima Ma'suma. Now, we know it's very interesting that the burial place of Fatima Zahra is unknown, and we've been told in a tradition from Ahlul Bayt, from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, we've been told in a tradition that Allah has destined for the grave of Fatima to be hidden till the Day of Judgment. He has destined this, and this is one of the reasons why her grave is hidden. But we notice something very interesting about Fatima Ma'suma. Fatima Ma'suma's grave is not hidden. In a matter of fact, her grave is a grave that, as I said before, that knowledge has congregated around and people have come to. And as you all know, she's buried in the city of Qom, and people have congregated into this in the city of Qom. Now we have a tradition even about the city of Qom, that a tradition from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, and this is related to Akhir al-Zaman. There is a tradition related about the end of time, when humanity will come to the end of time, and it says that in the future a time will come when Kufa will be empty, because Kufa was where knowledge was. Kufa is right next to Najaf. There will be a time that will come when Kufa will be empty from believers, and knowledge will go out of Kufa in the same way that a snake goes out of its hole. So the Imam is narrating that at the end of time in Akhir al-Zaman, that this place close to Kufa, which is Najaf, knowledge may slowly leave that place, and that Qom will become the center of that knowledge of Ahlul Bayt, of the traditions of Ahlul Bayt. And from that place will appear knowledge of Islam to the world. It's a very interesting tradition. That place of Qom will become a place that will become wide known all around the world, and knowledge will spread all around the world from that place. So we have these various traditions regarding where Hazrat Ma'suma is buried today. Now, regarding the rites that we spoke about, it's very interesting. Hazrat Ma'suma, her position is at a very high position. Her position is at the level of Isma, and I'm not saying that her level of position is at the level of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, but she had a level and position of purity that very few people have reached who are non-Ma'sum. We have a very interesting tradition from our Imams that Hazrat Ma'suma will be one of those people that will be able to intercede. A tradition from Imam Sadiq said that a lady from my children, whose name will be Fatima, daughter of Musa, will die in Qom, and on the Day of Judgment, this lady will intercede for all my Shia to enter heaven. Now, this tradition is really interesting because the Imams, we've been told in tradition, have said that there will be shuhada, and there will be various righteous people that will be able to intercede for us on the Day of Judgment. But we rarely see where the Imam will specify a very particular person. And we see that in this case, the Imam specifies Hazrat Ma'suma, that her legacy and her memory is not just about how pious she was, but it's about our relationship that we will have with her on the Day of Judgment as well. There is another tradition related by Imam Rida alayhi salam. He says, whoever visits her shrine while knowing, having ma'rifah and being aware of her status, not just visiting it and leaving it, but actually having a connection to her status, the reward for this will be Jannah, or will be heaven. So we have this tradition telling us that this relationship with Fatima Ma'suma should not just be a relationship that it's about going and visiting her shrine. You know, we hear this many times. There will be people who say, oh, what's the point of going and visiting the imams? And I've heard this from people many times. Many times I'll sit with people and I'll speak about doing ziyarat of the imams, and somebody will say, somebody very irreligious or secular will say to me, well, why do you visit the imams? What's the point? What do you get out of that, visiting the imams? What's the need to visit the imams? People just go there and people visit them, and people don't have any knowledge of them, and it's just a ritual. While this is true that many people may do this, and even that's not bad. Doing that ritual is very important for us to do. But the ultimate goal is to, when we go there, it's to have that ma'rifah of the imam, or it's to have that ma'rifah of the person we're doing ziyarat for. When we go to visit anybody, if we go to somebody's house, we sit with them, we eat dinner with them, we talk with them. One of the important things is sitting with them and having that sense of attention towards them. If we went to somebody's house for dinner and we were playing on our phone and we were talking to someone else and we were ignoring them, that person would regard that as probably insulting, or that person would regard that as a strange visit, that we came all this way to visit them and we didn't even care to not only pay attention to them, but to give them their rights. With the imams, it's the same thing. When we go there, something that's very important that we've been given the opportunity for is to make that connection with the imams of Ahlul Bayt, to have that sense of wilaya, that sense of connection to them. When we visit them, having ma'rifah, having an understanding, a deeper understanding of the imam, and making this connection with them will serve us. The purpose that it will serve us not only in this dunya, but it will serve us in the akhirah. Now I want to talk about one last thing regarding this, and I'll go to the rights of the believer. You know, there's so much talk in our communities today about things like mental health, and there's so much talk about what do we do? There's so many mental health problems in our community. There's so many issues in our community. One of the important things to remember is that the solace that we get from visiting the imams, the depth that we get, and the peace that we get from visiting the imams, that cannot be replaced by anything else. There's such a deep solace and such a deep comfort that we can get from the imams of Ahlul Bayt. And again, I'm not saying that if somebody just visits the imams of Ahlul Bayt, and they don't make that connection, that if they have mental health problems, everything will be okay. But what I am saying is that much of our spiritual health and our well-being is making that connection to something much higher than us. And the way we make that connection is through that chain that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us in this dunya. And this is why we see that people go to the shrine of the imams, and when they go, they get a sense of peace. People go with their problems, people go with their worries, people go with all of their things. And when they go there, they sit in front of the shrine of the imams. And you may talk to many people, and what you'll find out is that there is a certain peace in going there. That while all the chaos is around the world, that close to that shrine, everything stops. Just for a few moments. And if we have ma'rifah of the imam, that when we sit close to that shrine, that all of those worries, and all of those difficulties can disappear. And a person can sit at the shrine of the Imam and they can supplicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they can do tawassul to the Imam and make that connection, that their heart can go into a state of calmness and peace. Now, in this time that we live in, we're living in a time that's very interesting. We're living in a time where it's very confusing for people. We see all these pandemics going on. We see the pandemics that are happening, and it's a time of uncertainty. It's a time where we see, when they came out with this COVID, the situation with COVID-19, we see that we got some information, and then we got a lot of other information. They've got different information, and people are very confused. Leaders are very confused. Nobody knows what to do. There's different conspiracy theories. There's people who are saying it doesn't exist. There's people who are saying it does exist. And this is a worldwide event, something that the Imams of Ahlul Bayt have told us. In Akhir Zaman, you will see that some of these events that will happen will be worldwide events that everybody is seeing. Now you notice a second worldwide event happened. These events that have happened regarding these protests with this poor man who they had killed, simply because of his race, simply because he was black. Now you notice that it's not just an issue that happened in his city, but it expanded to his state, it expanded around the country, and then now it's expanding around the world. There are demonstrations in Australia, there are demonstrations in some places in the Middle East, there are demonstrations in Asia, there are demonstrations in Europe. Now oppression is slowly being highlighted around the world, where we see that not only it's one event, but we see that the backlash to this is that we see that there are protests, and these protests are going on, and they're going on, and they're going on, and they're continuing to go on. And what happens is, when these worldwide events come about, it creates a bit of uncertainty in us as human beings. We begin to start to think, what's happening in the world? There's pandemics, and then they're saying they don't know how long this is gonna last, and then they're saying that there may be a mutation, and there'll be another pandemic. And then on the other hand, we have oppression being highlighted, and we have all these riots taking place, and we have so much uncertainty there, and we have so much confusion there. And one of the things that we've been told is, for a believer in the time of Akhir Zaman, and it could be this time. I'm not saying it is this time. It could be this time. Maybe it's not this time. Or maybe if we don't fulfill our responsibility, that this time could pass us. We can be in a time where if our generation doesn't do the thing that it's supposed to do, and doesn't attach ourselves to our responsibilities during the time of the ghaiba of the Imam, then our generation can just be passed by, and fate can take its course, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not send the Imam to us. So in this time that we see where many things are being highlighted, we have traditions that speak about there will be disease during Akhir Zaman. There will be shortages of food during Akhir Zaman. There will be several shortages of food. There will be things that we need to do. Could this happen? It's possible. Could Allah delay this? It's possible. Could it not happen? Yes, it's possible. The important thing is that in this time, it's very important to be aware that worldwide people are becoming aware of what is happening to each other in every other part of the world. We are seeing that we know what happens in the Middle East. The Middle East knows what the oppression that's happening here. and everyone is being affected now by everything else that's happening in the world. In this time, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam have told us certain advices to do. Now, one of those advices were to be attached to their traditions, to be attached to their ahadith. Having this close connection, having this connection to them, knowing that they have this wilaya over us, they have this guardianship over us, and we have this connection to them in this time. The first thing that they've advised us to do is to know their traditions, know what their ahadith are. Another thing that they've advised us, very interestingly, in this time, in the time of Akhir Zaman, is for those people who are going to be Shia to the Imam, is to have a close relationship to the brothers and the sisters within the community who believe in the Imam. So that it's not just required that, okay, I believe in the Imam, I believe in Imam Zaman. Imam Zaman is there. I do ziyarat for the Imam, I do a nudba, I do a dua ahad, I do all of these supplications, and I stay in my home. But on the contrary, the Imam has given us very specific instructions. One of those instructions is that to fulfill the rights of a believer. And I'm just going to read a tradition regarding something the Imam has said. And it's narrated that the Imam says, a tradition of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, Ma abidallahu bishay'in, that Allah is not worshipped by anything better. Afdala min a'dai haqq al-mu'min, that Allah is not worshipped better than anything better than fulfilling the right of a believer. So the companion of the Imam comes to him and he asks Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that, he says, Imam, he says, tell me the rights of a believer. So the Imam says this to him. He says that there are 70 rights of a believer. 70. He says, but I'll only tell you of 7, because I'm worried that you will not be able to bear it. Then the Imam explained these 7 rights of a believer. And he said that the first thing he says, and these are very, I'm saying these rights to you as something that I'm trying to be conscious of and mindful of myself. Because one of the most difficult things in spirituality is giving rights, giving the rights to people that they deserve. The first one that the Imam said is that do not be satiated when he or she is hungry. Very simple one, right? Don't be satiated. Don't be content. You don't be happy. Don't fill your stomach when that believer is hungry. Now, obviously, we know there's a lot of hungry people in the entire world, but at least the believers around us. This gives us an idea that we should begin to think of at least who are those people around us who need help. You know, one of the things that we saw during this epidemic is, and the Muslim community tried to do this as much as possible, is there were families, people who lost their jobs, people who were in turmoil, people who were in difficulty, and some of the masajid reached out, some people reached out to help them financially. Let's be conscious of this is not going away anytime soon. That these people still may need help, and they may need help for a while. So this tradition, do not be satiated when they are hungry, is very important. And this could be with anything. This could be with several things that if somebody has something very specific in need and we have it, we should at least be conscious of the pain that that person is going through. It shouldn't be that people in the community come to us and they say, oh, I was going through this horrible thing for like 3 years and nobody called me. Sometimes that happens to us. And then we say, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't call you. I didn't realize. The second thing that the Imam says is, he says, do not be clothed when he does not or she does not have clothes to wear. So, alhamdulillah, in Western countries, people generally have clothes to wear and they have the ability to buy clothes. This is not always the case in other countries. So it's important, just not on just a local level, a global level, to at least, even if we can't give, but to think and to have that sense of pain in our heart that there are believers that don't have the ability to wear clothes. The next one, he says, is be a guide for him and be a dress for him that he wears. What does that mean? Be a guide for him and a dress for him. The Imam's trying to tell us that when somebody is, as a friend, as a believing friend, one of the important things and the duties we have in Akhir Zaman and just in general is that when somebody is going to make a mistake, try to help them. Try to guide them to the right place. Sometimes there are people who are making a mistake and they make a mistake and then they come back and they tell their friend about it and their friend said, oh, I knew you were making a mistake. And he's like, wait, why didn't you tell me? And the person's like, well, you didn't ask. So it's very important to actually advise somebody. And in these times, it's very difficult because in these times, we generally get very offended. Everybody gets very offended if anybody advises them or anyone tells them, don't advise me, or you don't know me, or you don't understand my situation. We're in a hypersensitive society, so even when someone has the best of intentions, we get very offended. So it's very important for us to realize also that if somebody comes to us and they try to guide us and give us advice in something, it's important not to get upset right away, even though our nafs, our self tells us, oh, get upset. Sometimes it's important just to allow that person to guide us if they think that it's that they're guiding us, if they're correct. But then the Imam says something very beautiful. He says, be a libas, be a dress for him or her that he wears. What is a dress for him that he wears? People wear dresses, clothes for various reasons. Some of those reasons are we wear clothes to clothe ourselves, but it's to protect ourselves also. Sometimes it's to protect ourselves from defects. And so we wear clothes to cover up those defects. And in this beautiful saying, the Imam is telling us, be the cloth of your brother. Be the cloth of him or your sister. Cover their faults up. They may not know that people can see things. Don't go out there and say, oh, this person did all this, or don't go out there and allow all their deeds and all their things to be exposed in the public. Be that cloth that covers them or that hides these defects for them. Then the Imam continues and he says, be a tongue for him with which he speaks. This is very, very beautiful. Many times we don't have a chance to speak for ourselves. We don't have the ability to speak for ourselves. Sometimes we're not in a place to speak for ourselves, whether people are speaking out against us or people are trying to hurt us, or we just don't have the ability to speak for ourselves. So speak up and defend your brother is what the Imam is saying. This is your duty. have that sense of duty that even if our brother is not present and something is being said against him, that we take it upon ourselves to say, okay, well, I'm going to say something on his behalf or her behalf. Then the Imam continues, and I'll try to get through this as soon as possible. I know we only have 5 minutes here. Then the Imam says something again. Whatever you desire for yourself, desire the same for him. And this is the most difficult one, that whatever we desire for ourselves, because we desire tons of things for ourselves. Most of us desire that we want to be, we want to have the best things, and we want to have the best opportunities, and we don't want people to talk about us, and we don't want our faults to be looked at, and this is important, so that we desire that same thing for our brother, that whatever faults he has or whatever things about him he has, we still, our guiding principle is that what in that state, if he's ignorant of what he's doing, even, we desire for him what we desire for ourselves. So we don't just say, okay, well, he gets this and I get this, but we at least desire it for him. And part of that is that we begin to pray for him. Just imagine if we approached all of our social relations, even with the people that we dislike. There's many people that we dislike. If the way that we approached our relationship with that person, even though we don't like talking to them, we don't like spending time with them, but if we just prayed for them, and we asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide them, and we asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help them, and we asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to assist them in their good deeds, imagine how much that will transform us as well. And then the Imam continues, and he says that if you have a servant, send him to your brother in faith, so that he may sweep his floor and prepare his bed and make effort day and night to fulfill his needs. This is a very interesting hadith, that if you have something, if you have the ability, even if you can't do it, if you have the ability or a tool or something else that can help your brother, to the extent that you even help him clean his home, help him do his basic necessities, go ahead and do that. So it's not just, oh, okay, well, he doesn't really need my help. Oh, he can figure it out. Oh, he can take care of it. If we have somebody that asks us for something, it's so very important that whatever we have at our disposal, we begin to think, would our brother or sister in Islam need this? I'd be willing to give this to them if they need it, and I can send this to them. And then the Imam ends off, he says, if you are like this, then you have joined in our wilaya. Then you have wilaya for us. With this wilaya, with our wilaya, and this wilaya with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, with this wilaya, our mastership, our wilaya, and our mastership, the Imam's wilaya with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will gain wilaya with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah will have then wilaya and this closeness with you. So the way that we connect directly to the Imam of the age, people always ask this question. People ask the question, well, how do I see the 12th Imam? How do I connect with the 12th Imam? One of the ways that we connect with the Imam immediately is that we connect with those believers that believe in the Imam, like forming a chain that links to the Imam himself. So there are many other traditions regarding this concept of wilaya and how we connect directly to the Imam. I'm going to give you one more tradition before I end this that's very important. as we talk about connecting to Ahl al-Bayt, as we talk about connecting to Hazrat Fatima Ma'suma, something very practical we can implement. And this tradition is narrated by Imam Sadiq alayhi salam again. He says that, he says, when a believer approaches another believer, when a believer asks from another believer, for the removal of his difficulty, for the removal of his hardship, he says, this referring, this even asking that believer is a mercy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to that other believer. Sometimes we always ask the question, how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us mercy? He gives us mercy through His rizq, through giving us food, through sustenance, through a number of ways, through sending of the Imam, through an enormous amount of ways. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always sending mercy towards us. But one way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends mercy to us, in addition to this, is that when a believer asks us of something, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy that He's sending to us. Because if we are able and we're capable to fulfill the right of that believer, the reward that we'll get from that opportunity, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's actually a mercy coming to us, that if we can fulfill that, even if we have the intention to fulfill that, we'll get rewarded. If a believer doesn't ask us for help, if a believer doesn't, there's nobody that asks us for help, there's nobody that cares to ask us for help, then this could mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not sending that type of mercy to us. This is actually a great barakah that we have when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends people to us to ask us for help. The Imam continues and he says this. He says that this is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's side. He says, which He has given towards His servant, towards His abd. If the person addresses the believer's needs, he has attached himself to us, to this wilaya. And then the Imam says, and our wilaya is attached to Allah's wilaya. He says, but if he rejects this believer who is mustadaf, that is distressed, while he's able to fulfill the demands of that believer. So if somebody comes and asks me, and they're in trouble, they're in need, they say, please, Kauther, please, can you just help me? And I'm able to do it, but I'm just like, oh, well, he'll figure it out. He's got to do it himself, whatever. He'll do it. He says, if he rejects that distressed believer while he's able to do it, then Allah will appoint something from him, a snake from the fire over him. Regardless of whether he's forgiven by that believer. Then he says, if that distressed believer excuses him from doing this, then that person's condition becomes even worse. Now, why would that person's condition become worse? If somebody asks me, Kauther, please help me, and I have the ability, Allah's sending His mercy towards me, and I just say to myself, oh, that's okay, I don't need to help him, he'll figure it out, it's okay, it's no big deal. And if that believer has such generosity in his heart, such kindness in his heart, such beauty in his heart, that he says, oh, Kauther wasn't able to help me. I know Kauther can help me, but I forgive him. It's okay, I forgive him. Now, what that is that believer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has tested that believer in me, and that believer has so much patience and so much beauty in his heart that he's saying, okay, Kauther could have done this. He is connected to me through the Imam. He did something wrong. He didn't even want to help me, but that's okay. I still forgive him. That would make my situation in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even worse because of the graciousness of that particular believer. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us and give us the ability to have this, to fulfill the rights of all the believers that we can. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for our sins. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our end good. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us in the time, if we live in the time of Akhir Zaman. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring us closer to this connection to the Imam, to the connection to the followers of the Imam, to the connection to the Ma'sumin, to the connection to Hazrat Ma'suma. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring us closer to her, to give us ma'rifah of her, and to give us that spiritual connection to her. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to include us with the Imam when he returns. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi at-tahirin. I'm going to, I think my time is up, so I've got a note here not to forget the questions. I have not forgot the questions. I'm going to, if you can give me just a minute here, I'll read off these questions. If not, I can see if I can read these off and answer them, inshallah. Give me just a moment here. Okay, so we have the first question here. We often hear a hadith that say, help your brother, neighbor. Where's the line though? Most people begin to take advantage or they become dependent on you. Very good question. Excellent question. Okay. So this is a very difficult one, right? Because we have, there are people that, there are people sometimes that go, they will ask of you and they will ask of you and they'll ask of you and they'll ask of you and they'll ask of you when they're not distressed, when they can do it themselves. So there are those people in society that sometimes they would ask of you to the point where they would take advantage of you. And Islamically, Islam doesn't tell us that, you know, I have to go to work, and if somebody calls me and says, okay, don't go to work, Islam is not saying don't go to work, just go help this person. Islam is not necessarily saying that. That although believers have rights, I have a right to, my wife has rights, my children have rights, my teacher has rights. There's all these other people in society and things in society that have rights, and it's important that we know those rights as well, and we're able to fulfill those rights. It's not that if somebody just keeps asking us, we say, okay, well, I'm just not going to go home and I'm not going to go to work because I'm just going to help you, or I'm not going to help my family because I'm going to help you. And this is something also condemned in traditions. It's important to know, you know, the rights of all of the people around us in society, and give those rights, give people their rights, their dues. So yes, if there's a particular situation where we have somebody trying to take advantage and we know they're not distressed, then we have to assess that situation correctly. And we have to see if this is infringing again on our own rights and infringing on our family's rights or other rights and other responsibilities that we have. So it's not always that no matter what somebody asks us we do, but it is that this is such an important duty that we have to be very, very mindful of it, and just make sure that we know that we're paying attention to the rights of the believers. Okay, there's another question at the end of times. What is the best way to preserve your religion? And the third question is, thank you for answering. Is there a resource that we can look at about the prioritization of rights? And excellent. Okay. So for the first question, at the end of times, what is the best way to preserve your religion? So this is an interesting question. We have several traditions about, or certain traditions about, at the end of time in Akhir Zaman, it will be more difficult to hold on to your iman than it is to hold on to something with thorns. We have another tradition that it's going to be more difficult to hold on to your iman than it is to hold on to coal. So this challenge is real. Sometimes if we are in that time, if Allah has blessed us to be in the time of Akhir Zaman, it's not that we will be blessed because we would be close to the Imam arriving, but it's not that we wouldn't have challenges. It's not that that wouldn't be easy. And so the traditions tell us this, that it's difficult, and many times we'll see that in times in our life, and we don't know if it is Akhir Zaman, but we'll see that in general, living in a secular society, or a society sometimes that doesn't value religion, we'll see that it's sometimes not only very difficult for us to hold on to our Iman, we see in society that it's very difficult for other people to hold on to their Iman. We see people who were religious and all of a sudden give up religion, or forsake religion. There's a tradition that in Akhir Zaman that you will see that people are Muslim in the morning, and they are mu'min in the morning, and they become kafir in the evening. Meaning that this transition that we will see sometimes of Iman to kufr will be quick. It will be shocking, right? When we see people a certain way in the morning and a certain way suddenly in the evening, it's almost like we see a person just change immediately. It kind of shocks us. And we begin to ask, well, why did that person do that? How did they change? We even sometimes talk to our friends about it. We'll say, oh, did you know that person? Is everything okay with that person? There's suddenly something going on with them. And this is very shocking to our system. And part of the reason this is shocking is because it's very difficult to hold on to Iman when we see everything around us, the chaos that's around us. Now, just like I talked about the pandemics, and I talked about the riots, and I talked about all of these things, part of the chaos that's occurring around us is also the chaos of this spread of kind of kufr, and the spread of immorality, and the spread of fisq. This sometimes confuses us. It takes us by surprise because we see so much of it on a daily basis on social media and in society, and then sometimes with the people in our communities. We suddenly see a person do something that's really strange we never thought they would do. And then we see everything from pop culture and media and all of these people, and it's being promoted and promoted and promoted. So some of the things that are important, so we've been told is that this could certainly happen in Akhir Zaman. The first thing that we've been told is to hold on to this wilayat, hold on to this connection to the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. This is the firmest stronghold. This is the strongest rope we can hold on to. In this day and age, people think that, oh, okay, yeah, I know this already. I know we should go visit the Imams, and I know that Imam Ali is good, and I know the Prophet is good, and I know Imam Sadiq is good. This constant connection, this constant touching, this electricity to them is one of the things, it's the first step to keeping us on the right track. Everything else is secondary. That constant connection to them is one of the most important things that we can do. The second constant connection to keeping connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our salat. And even if we can't pray all the mustahabat, even if we can't do it perfect, even if we don't concentrate on it completely, allow that guilt to go away for a moment and just try as best as we can to continue on that path of doing our best to make each salat every day, even if we do the bare minimum, the bare wajibat. in the salat. At least if we do that, that's important. These are the two very, very important things to keep our iman in this time of Akhir Zaman. Let me go to the next question. That's a much bigger question that requires more depth, but I'm gonna there's a lot of things we can say about that. But is there a resource that we can look at the prioritization of rights and responsibilities? Yes, the first thing that's important is to go to the traditions of the Imams, and the book Risalatul Huquq by Imam Sajjad will give us the very basics of what those rights are. Reading that book, Risalatul Huquq, translated as the Treatise of Rights or the Risala of Rights, it's a very short book, but what's important is to take that book and read it, but don't just read it, just ponder on it. Just take one tiny paragraph, and they're very small paragraphs. There's the right of Allah, the right of the Prophet, the right of the Imam, the right of the believer. There's all these different rights in there. Just take one right and read it, and ask the Imam to give us ma'rifah and to give us insight into his words. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be able to understand the Imam's words, because we're referring to his tradition, the Imam's tradition, and that's where we begin to at least begin that journey of understanding rights. As we read that and we begin to integrate that and soak that in, there are going to come up questions about whose rights are more, and very specific questions, or do I give this person their right or this person their right? And for that, our maraja and asking possibly a scholar, I have this situation between these two rights that conflict, which takes precedent? That's something that's always going to be a question, because there are going to be rights that conflict sometimes in society, and some rights take precedent over other rights. And for that, we need to really consult with somebody on a case-by-case basis. Somebody just wrote something. With all that's going on, it sometimes feels like you are lonely and the world is too small. We can't visit the Imam's shrines. How can we remedy this feeling? So I'm going to give you a tradition narrated by one of our Imams. It's a beautiful tradition that I always remember. And I remember this tradition sometimes when I feel distant from the Imam. This tradition, it's an important tradition. It's just a tradition I typically use. It's not, there's no recommendation or anything from our ulama, but it's a tradition that it helps me remember the Imam. And that there was a time somebody came to one of our Imams, and he told the Imam, I have doubts about you. I don't exactly, I believe in you, but I don't exactly believe in you, kind of. And the Imam told the person, his companions, take him and put him in the river. The man began to struggle, and then he pulled him out. And then they put him back in the river and they pulled him out. They did this for three or so times. And on the third time, the man said, okay, take me out this time. I understand. And now why the river and what was the reason, we don't know, and that's not really important. But whatever trance that the man was in, and whatever thinking he was in, wrong thinking he was in, the Imam told his companions to do this to the man, so the man could begin to understand and think differently. But the man comes out and he says, the Imam asks him, he says, what is it you understand? And the man says, I understood now. This thing was broken. This understanding that I had was broken. And it was Imam Jawad, and the Imam says, so what what do you understand? He said, now I see. He said, I see that I looked up in the sky and I saw Imam Jawad. I looked around me, I saw Imam Jawad. I looked all around me, I saw Imam Jawad. I realized that you're everywhere. And then the Imam told him, now you've understood. And something that we have to realize in the ghaybat of the Imam, it's that the Imam has a connection to us, an unimaginable connection and a deep connection to us that we don't realize. He's aware of what we do. He is desirous to return. And it's not that the Imam has left us. It's that the Imam is actually very deeply connected to all the pain and suffering that the world is going through, and our individual pain as well, if we believe in him. So he knows this. And the Imam prays for us. And the Imam loves the believer. And having the solace that although we cannot see the Imam, understanding that the Imam is everywhere. It doesn't matter if we're in America or we're in Asia or we're in Europe or in the Middle East or wherever we are. If our heart makes that connection to the Imam, maybe, just maybe, we would be like that companion. And maybe we would see the Imam, or we would feel his presence everywhere. I think that's all the questions for today. I don't see any more questions. Inshallah, when this is over, I'll be able to see all of you. I don't know who's watching, but I'll be able to see all of you in person, inshallah. And I hope that we can all connect, inshallah. One day, inshallah, we will all connect, inshallah, at the shrine of the Imam. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi al-tahirin.